year two of the Sinquefield Cup is like the most epic thing ever. What a memory to be able to relive something that was just simply something we may not see again in another 30, 35 years.
Exactly. The 2014 Sinquefield Cup, famous for Fabiano Caruana's 7-0 streak. We were watching it in the booth, and it's like each round we were like, okay, this is going to stop soon. When is he just going to make a draw like a normal person? And he just kept coming with these dazzling victories. I think the memory maker for me to start off was the victory against Magnus Carlsen, of course, the world champion with the black pieces.
That night D3 was monstrous. It was a complex game, of course. Magnus didn't have to lose this game, but Fabi just kept upping the ante with vicious calculations and then finally coming up with moves that Magnus cracked at the end. But the force of play by Fabi was remarkable. I mean, every game was coming, he was winning a different way. He played a novelty in his game against MVL when MVL decides to play a Caro-Kann, and then he walks right into a bomb. And then he beats Magnus this complex way. It was remarkable to see how he was doing it.
It's true. I mean, actually, Gary Kasparov, in commenting on this tournament, said that what was so remarkable about Fabi's result was not only that he had 7-0, which of course is astronomical, but also that he wasn't benefiting from massive howlers from his opponents. They weren't blundering. He was just winning in incredible ways, and each way different. In round 4, he beat Levan Aronian in a maneuvering game that Fabi later said was one of his favorite games of all time.
I think Grisha called it the best game he's ever seen, which is pretty cool. And also, you make this point, I mean, he won in so many different ways. His opponents were laudatory. They were all of them saying, this is unbelievable. They were basically playing for second place, and they could see it, and they couldn't stop it. And Magnus himself, who could never even imagine giving up in a tournament, started feeling the force of Fabi's amazing play. And he was quite congratulatory about it.
Yeah, he was very respectful towards Fabi. In fact, he kind of presaged the World Championship match that they would play a few years later, because he was like, yep, he's the guy. He's the guy to beat. I mean, besides me, of course, right? And another great game, of course, he beat Veselin Topalov in dazzling sacrificial style. He beat Maxime Vachier-Lagrave for the second time in the tournament in a really bizarre game where it was like a normal symmetrical position, but Maxime's king was on c3. And finally, he ended up stopping the streak in round 8, but he had already clinched the tournament.
Well, he kind of was playing against Magnus, so it would have been very hard to just keep running. Although he did have a good position against Nakamura in round 9, that potentially was a winning game. But after you're already +7 against this field, I mean, that's completely ridiculous. One thing I remember was his 7 wins were equal to the entire tally of 7 wins for the rest of the field, which included Magnus's wins, which included Levan's wins, and I think only 1 win from MVL and Topalov, with Naka not scoring any wins. So, I mean, you by yourself basically lapped the field. That field is astonishing.
And to me, it also really, looking back on that tournament, it puts in perspective the Fabiano factor in the United States. After that tournament, he switched federations to U.S. chess, but it kind of felt like this was an inspiration for that. He felt at home in St. Louis. The city and the country really started to get to know Fabiano, who was born here, but spent much of his professional chess life before that in Italy, playing for Italy. And I remember, played in the Burning Boards exhibition, and that was so much fun, Maurice. We all played against a different artist. Who did you play? Francis Naumann, maybe?
Yes, Francis Naumann. That is who I played. Francis
gallery
Naumann,
owner from New York.
The gallery owner in New York. That's exactly who I played. Playing on those chess boards with the candles burning, and they're trying to remember the positions, what pieces are what. And there were actually some pretty decent games that ended up getting played, and memorable games, in fact, that ended up getting played during the Burning Boards.
It was a stunning exhibition. I actually made the pairings. So Fabiano played against an artist, Lilia Lifanova, and that game was actually a draw. So actually, his first draw in the Sinquefield Cup was in the Burning Boards exhibition.
Because he was kind enough to give a draw, of course.
Exactly, a major gentleman on the board, and of course, totally the ruthless, racking up 7-0. The artist there, Glenn Kino, played against Magnus Carlsen, and Magnus's second visit to St. Louis. Not quite as memorable as his first, of course, in that he did not win the tournament. But remember that when he came in 2014, he came as a world champion.
Also, didn't Rex just brutally wipe out his opponent in that one?
4-move checkmate.
I mean, he was unforgiving. The candles didn't even start burning when he was already checkmated his opponent, and he had no mercy whatsoever. What are you teaching this guy?
Well, I think, he wanted to win the game. I mean, you can't blame Rex. You can't blame Rex. Although, of course, it was an artistic exhibition, so most people let the wax melt into these stunning configurations, and Rex was just like, forget about that. Get me that W.
It's terrible. But getting back to Fabi's performance, the perspective on history. It wasn't just the Sinquefield Cup coming into its own. I think that's an important point to make. Once he did that, it wasn't just another tournament anymore. It became sort of a marker for the rest of all time, that this had been put down as maybe the greatest single performance of any chess player at any point in history in a tournament.
Agreed. I think that it was incredible. And of course, when you say the greatest performance of all time, you think Fabiano Caruana's result in the Sinquefield Cup in St. Louis. Now, 5 years later, we're certainly saying that. You also might think about Bobby Fischer's streak, but just shows you the kind of company that Fabiano was becoming in. And a few years later, he played Magnus for the World Championship, and you couldn't help but think that the Sinquefield Cup kind of predicted that.
When you talk about Bobby Fischer's streak, are you talking about the match streak where he beat everybody in the World Championship match?
No, I'm talking about the U.S. Championship.
Oh, the U.S. Championship doesn't compare, though. The U.S. Championship to Magnus Carlsen and Levon Aronian, these monsters. No, I mean, the U.S. Championship streak was quite good, but it could not compare possibly to this one. I think maybe things back, was it Las Palmas 94 maybe?
With Garry Kasparov.
Those kind of performances. Karpov, I remember winning a Linares in incredible style, if memory serves. That compares, because you're talking about the elite of the elite. This was a 28.02 rating average.
It was the highest rated tournament of all time in 2014.
At that point. And to go 7-0 against that field, including the world champion, the reigning world champion, I mean, that's completely ridiculous. And he, not only that, he won the tournament with such a score that second place was +1. He was +7. It's outrageous. I think the only thing that's going to match that for Fabi's career, ever, no matter what he does, is defeating Magnus, becoming world champion. I think he really set himself up on like a high measure now that this says you've got to become world champion because you're not going to do better than that.
It truly was remarkable. Those of you who weren't watching it, I urge you to relive it. It's almost the kind of thing that for me, Yaz and Maurice, who are calling the games, if somebody had showed us this script, that this is what's going to happen, we would have said, no, this is unrealistic. You got to change it.
Yeah.
Because it's impossible.
And what's interesting about that, you talk about a script, usually there's drama in the script, right? There's like, who's going to win? It comes to the wire. The finish could be a fantastic finish. But sometimes the drama is in the excellence. And in this case, you're watching someone play at such an elite level almost computer-esque, angelic, that you're mystified just watching. You're in awe. Like, what is going on that this guy is performing at this incredible level?
The 2014 Sinquefield Cup, we were really blessed to have that tournament here, and it felt after that event that the Sinquefield Cup had been around for decades, and it was only 2 years.